Hello everyone! I've decided to talk about how different kinds of women react to MGTOW, as well as what one woman told me about MGTOW and how I responded to what she said to me about it. In the beginning, I'd like to read a remark that was made by a lady named Leslie Fetch. This is what Leslie had to say about some of my films after she had watched them. These videos are, to put it mildly, really strange. MGTOW was not a company that I was familiar with before my accidental discovery of this film. From my perspective, they are extremely sexist, yet they do it in an ignorant rather than malicious manner. Therefore, rather than making me feel as though it is an assault on women, I believe these are blatantly skewed due to a lack of male liability for dishonorable activities, and the facts are presented in an emotionally neutral manner that seems to be highly genuine. Consequently, even though I am concerned about the message that is being communicated, I am relieved that there is not any antagonism directed toward women. I'm interested. I've read academic writings in which a woman argues that males are nothing but difficulties, and then she goes on to declare very seriously that all women should essentially become lesbians, at least until the oppressive gender dynamics are handled. I've seen those kinds of essays. These articles continue by implying that sexual activity with a man can only result in violence, which is an absolutely absurd assertion to make. I'm not arguing that women aren't sometimes to blame for horrible things, but I do feel that these fundamentalist gender attitudes, whether they're directed at men or women, are damaging to both genders. Whether they're directed at men or women, now, I'm going to quiz you on something that requires significant thought. Do the male supporters of MGTOW advocate the complete segregation of the sexes? Do you honestly believe women hold all of the power, despite the fact that such beliefs frequently strike me as being completely irrational? And how much of a role do you think men have in the gender dynamics that are so messed up, in your opinion? How are we to make sense of the fact that the majority of powerful positions in government and business have been held by white men who have amassed enormous fortunes and levels of influence? Are there any aspects of the concept of patriarchy with which you can identify and agree? I am a lady. I'm not trying to dismiss your point of view, but I am interested in gaining a deeper understanding of it. I have a lot of questions. Are we sexist, Leslie? Because we refuse to give up our lives for women and do things for and by ourselves instead of sacrificing ourselves for them. The friendliness of downtowns and midtowns is not malicious. Instead, they deliberately engage in passive hostile behavior, and we are not the least bit innocent either. If you take the red pill, you will be able to see through the impenetrable fog of covert control and manipulation that women, state companies, and cultural institutions have constructed in front of us males in order to keep us blind. This is only possible if you take the red pill. When we get through the haze, we can see that women intentionally make things complicated so that men like us can continue to leap through feminine hoops for the rest of our lives. This is done so that women can continue to have power over us. We are now free, and you are nothing more than a tyrant if you characterize our freedom as being sexist. What you are looking at right now on the internet, Leslie, is a man who has finally spoken up against the constraints that women have imposed on males since the dawn of time. Because we are being truthful, reasonable, and unaffected by what we already know, you are interested in what we have to say. Many women would have a temper tantrum if they found out that someone was oppressing them in the same way that women oppressed men. The fact that we were only permitted to have sexual encounters when we behaved in a way that was thought appropriate by the feminine collective is one of the ways in which a large number of women have shaped our behavior. Women treat physical contact with males like they would with a pet. If we take you to a dinner party or purchase you something you've always wanted, such as a handbag or flowers, you typically show your appreciation by showing your love and being physically intimate with us. And if we don't, then what? What choices do you have before you? Males from the Midtown area have put us in a compromising position. Unless, of course, this is a characteristic of the female nature. It is no longer a mystery to us, and many of us have experienced it to the point where we understand that this is simply the nature of women, and that being upset about it is a waste of time because there is nothing that can be done to change it. Isn't it annoying when the baby poops in its diaper? In all likelihood, no. When it rains, do we find ourselves getting irritated? Naturally, this is not the case. Instead, we bring an umbrella with us everywhere we go. In this instance, the internet serves as our umbrella. The protection that we have comes from our knowledge and from sharing our experience with one another. You also state, Leslie, that many female authors in academic articles believe that men are the problem and that all women should essentially become lesbians. This is something that I would like to comment on. According to me, this means that these women are terrified of us and the power that we possess. If you've ever been to a demonstration in support of feminist causes, you've probably observed that there are a significant number of lesbians in attendance. They are making an effort to arouse the ire of men in the hopes that impressionable young women will flock to the feminist cause, whereas the men who have chosen to go their own way are predominantly heterosexual males. We don't encourage men to cheat on their wives and start relationships with other men, and we don't try to control each other the way that these women authors do. The majority of us have had romantic relationships with women, and it is a challenging final step for many of us to accept the fact that in order to move on with our lives, we need to give up the dream that is known as love. This dream is what keeps men in the role of boys throughout their entire lives. Real men are feared by society because they live their lives for themselves and without looking back with regret. Residents of Midtown are of the opinion that society intentionally keeps us miserable and discontent in order to force us to be more productive. However, the reality is that when we are happy, we are much more productive than usual. Despite this, our society is terrified of the joy we experience. You believe that males are more than just violent when it comes to having sexual relations with females, and that this is true regardless of the context. Additionally, some women appreciate the fact that certain guys may be rough in bed. Despite the fact that some guys might be slackers and pushovers, some women find this trait repugnant. One person's trash is another's treasure. You also assert that gender stereotypes and essential notions can be harmful to both men and women, which is a really interesting assertion to make. When compared to men, women have a more collaborative approach to their interactions with one another. As a direct consequence of this, women are significantly more likely to fall prey to the conventional clichés that are associated with men. On the other hand, they tend to be more introverted and individualistic in their outlook. As a direct consequence of this, the worldviews that we hold tend to be more varied. Although I acknowledge that there are situations in which stereotyping can be damaging, I also believe that the vast majority of men need to be exposed to more general information in order for them to be able to understand the concepts. I also talk about particular females by adding personal experiences that both I and other males in my life have had with those particular ladies. In the conversation, I addressed both the positive and the negative parts of your significant worries over the large towel. You start off by questioning whether we support complete gender segregation in the workplace. After all, we don't see a strict division between the sexes, and many of us have no problem going out on dates with women or engaging in sexual activity with them on occasion. However, despite the ridiculous expectations that women sometimes place on us, we are not going to change who we are or the way we conduct our lives in order to appease them. In addition, we are of the firm belief that women have all the power because they make up the largest portion of the voting population. In our culture, the distribution of roles and responsibilities between men and women is not equal. If men pass away 5 years earlier than women, there will be more female votes than male ballots in an election. As a direct consequence of this, women now hold a greater political influence than men. Recently, I had a conversation with a lady who was of the opinion that I should not agree with you on this. When I mentioned it, she immediately thought that it had to be 50/50, but it actually isn't. In some other countries, the female population proportion ranges from 53 to 54% of the total population. Where do we stand in terms of gender equality with regard to representation? The idea that men and women should have equal voting rights is laughable and will never gain traction. You, Leslie, also wondered about the proportion of guilt that should be placed on men for the imbalanced gender dynamics that exist in today's society. Men are a bunch of pussywhips. No one, including other men, women, or children, has any affection for a man who is whipped, and no one enjoys the company of swimpy males. Therefore, when men act like manginas and white knights, they make an effort to aid women and provide them with what it is that they desire. They are, in point of fact, making life difficult for the rest of us. Men are dangerous because they are considerate and they construct structures that are not meant for men. I recently told Gina, a previous customer of mine, that I'm a man's man and that I'm an alpha male. I told her that I've only been this way for the past year and a half, ever since I grew a pair of balls and started observing women's behavior using my rational faculties rather than my emotions. Gina told me that I'm a man's man and that I'm an alpha male. Women, on the other hand, need to take on more responsibility because they make up the vast majority of single parents and are ultimately responsible for raising men and boys. This results in a situation in which males become angina and undermines gender dynamics. Because of this, women need to take on more responsibility. You may also be perplexed as to why there are a disproportionate number of men holding high-ranking positions in both business and politics. The response to that question is quite simple. Although the Menster enterprise is a creation, the majority of the money and innovation generated by males is managed and redistributed by women. Because men are the ones who invent everything, it stands to reason that they should be the ones to make the money and, in turn, generate the power. As was Facebook, it was also established by a male founder, as was Google, which was founded by two guys. The steam engine was initially developed by a man. As a result, you are advocating that men create 99% of the things we use in our daily lives, establish their businesses, and then hand them over to women. Generally speaking, men who accumulate wealth and power do so in order to entice and maintain relationships with attractive women. The majority of males view wealth and power as both a means and an end in themselves. If you want to be a communist, Leslie, you should move to a country like Cuba or North Korea, where men cede their authority to women. When men lose the ability to accumulate wealth and power, they stop innovating and caring about things because they realize that working for nothing is a fruitless endeavor. In addition to that question, you asked me whether or not I believe in patriarchy in any of its many guises. My reaction is that patriarchy is a term that is used to deny males their rights by indicating that men need to share power equally. This is what I mean when I say that the term patriarchy is utilized. However, power is not the issue here. It's all about taking responsibility. To ensure that the roads, factories, buildings, and other essential infrastructure continue to function properly, men are in charge of the responsibility. The vast majority of women, on the other hand, do not choose to work in the construction or road maintenance industries, nor do they wish to be responsible. They have a dream of working as city planners like the fictional character Spider-Man, issuing orders to road workers about what repairs need to be made while sitting in the security and comfort of an office. His uncle once made the observation that great power comes with enormous responsibility and that the majority of women aspire to have great male power, but not great man duty.